need to be on a meeting 31 minutes ago.
I see Faith has joined us. That's great. Are we on, Heather?
Yes.
Meeting 31 minutes.
Okay. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Industrial Development Agency for April 20th, 2022. And I welcome everybody. First item of business is privilege of the floor, and we do have some public comment. We have, I believe, 3. Is that right, Ina?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
There's Ina. Okay.
Here.
Heather, do you want to split these up with me? I would read one and then you read one.
I would love to, if I could find them. Oh, here they are. Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to start with, this is a letter from the Office of the Supervisor for the Town of Dryden. Dear Mr. John, please accept this letter in support of the funding request submitted by Ithaca Area Economic Development, IAED, on behalf of its broadband connectivity project. If approved, the $350,000 match will allow IAED to retain the $400,000 Appalachian Regional Commission grant and secure another $3.2 million from its preferred vendor for a total investment of over $4 million. The project will deploy 56 miles of fiber infrastructure and address the rural digital divide by connecting unserved and underserved households and servicing local municipalities. As you know, the town of Dryden is building our own municipal broadband system called Dryden Fiber. Our intent is to make fiber to the home available to every resident and every business within the town of Dryden and compete with existing providers. With the passage of the Wired Act within the New York State 2023 budget, there is a clear mandate from the legislature and the governor to deploy municipal broadband in rural communities. We believe that the fiber deployed in the IAED project will benefit not only Lansing, but Dryden as well. We have requested that the town of Dryden have access to the northern route, middle mile, and southern route, middle mile, and are currently in discussions regarding this access. We believe that working with IAED to expand the reach of Dryden Fiber will allow us to expand the reach of our project more quickly. Should you have any comments or questions regarding my support for this project or IAED's request for funding, please contact my office at sincerely, Jason Leifer, Supervisor, Town of Dryden.
Okay, next I have a letter from Mike Hall, President of PFA Consulting. Dear Mr. John, I'm writing in support of the funding request submitted by IAED on behalf of its broadband connectivity project. If approved, the request will leverage a $400,000 federal grant from the Appalachian Regional Commission and unlock a $3.2 million commitment from an industry-leading internet service provider for a community investment totaling more than $4 million. The goal is to construct 56 miles of broadband infrastructure and deliver myriad community benefits, such as connecting 50 additional unserved households and providing competitive service and pricing to over 1,500 households, supporting local municipalities and more. When conceived in 2020, the goal of the project was simply to construct 17 middle miles of fiber broadband to facilitate the transition of the former Cuba operating company coal plant. A lot has changed since then, and I applaud IAED for adapting to the circumstances and for advocating on behalf of our community. The pandemic has exposed widespread inequities in digital accessibility and affordability, both of which IAED is helping address through this project. When complete, it will enable remote work and learning environments that better position our economy for future growth and prosperity. I have worked in concert with IAED to advocate for the repeal of PERM 75, a state fee on broadband deployment that is especially harmful to rural areas like Tompkins County. During that ultimately successful process, I learned a lot about broadband and IAED's leadership and commitment in delivering this vital infrastructure. I urge you to approve IAED's request for an investment of $350,000 needed to deliver this important project. If you or other members of the board have any questions or seek further information, please do not hesitate to contact me at 607-279-2662 or mhall@pfaconsulting.com.
Okay, and then we have a comment from Todd Kurzweil, who's the owner of, let's see, I want to get this right, Uncle Toddy Ithacan Flea Market on the Commons. Dear TCIDA board members, thank you for your efforts to continue to improve your application for approval process, oversight, accountability, and communication about economic development project, the Ithacan. Communication and the opportunity to speak and be heard are important civic opportunities for me. Are you aware of the October 27th, 2020 City of Ithaca resolution that brought Ithaca College formally into the Ithacan project? Is it a record of the TCIDA? This resolution materially changed the DDA that allowed for this project and initially protected the tenants of 215 East State Street from displacement. And then he has included that resolution, which I'm not going to read, but it is, let's see, a resolution of the City of Ithaca Planning and Development Board, mixed use apartment and parking, 215 East State / MLK Street, west section of Green Garage, October 27th, 2020. And he includes the resolution. And then how and when was this resolution received by the IAED or TCIDA? Why weren't the tenants named in this resolution as they were previously in the DDA? Signed, Uncle Toddy, Ithacan Flea Market. Are there any other comments to come before the IDA? Seeing none, I will close privilege of the floor. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, I'd like to proceed to first order of business, the 2021 audit presentation. And if I could just start before turning it over to say thank you to Rick Snyder and the team at County Finance for all their work on this, and to Evan Cleveland, who's with us from Insero, and your team. It was a lot of work, as I saw at the wrap-up sessions and the planning sessions, and it seemed like it went very smoothly. So thank you all for all the work on it. Jeff Gorski and I attended the meeting on behalf of the IDA. I'm trying to remember if there were any other IDA members there, but so we have received this review. But Heather, why don't you jump in at this point?
Okay, I also wanted to thank Ina Arthur. She's
yes.
really the glue that gets all of the information from all the projects and inputs everything into the system for all the Paris reports, interfaces with Rick Snyder and with Evan. So thank you, Ina, for all of your diligent work. I know you're busy in January and February and March. I'd like to turn it over to Evan Cleveland to talk about the audit in particular.
Thank you very much. Can you allow me to share my screen? Oh, it appears that I am able to.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you all for having me here this afternoon to go over the audit results for the Tompkins County IDA and Development Corporation. I would also like to echo comments earlier. A big thank you to Heather, Ina, and Rick Snyder for all their work involved in getting us everything we need to perform the audit and meet the Authority and Budget Office deadline of 3/31. Evan Cleveland, I'm an audit principal with Insero & Company. And I'll go over our executive summary here in front of you. So we are issuing an unmodified opinion on both the IDA and Development Corporation's financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2021. So that's otherwise known as a clean opinion. It is the best opinion that you can get. Means your assets, liabilities, net position, revenues, and expenses are all fairly stated in all material respects. Because we also perform an audit under government and auditing standards, we issue a report on internal control or financial reporting. And that report identified no instances of non-compliance, no material internal control weaknesses. Continuing along, we also issue a letter at the conclusion of the audit. So we do one at the beginning of the audit and at the end of the audit in writing that has no comments of concern regarding qualitative aspects of accounting practices. We had no new accounting policies to implement. We encountered no difficulties in performing the audit, had no corrected or uncorrected misstatements, no disagreements with management, obtained a management representation letter, which essentially says that we've been provided with everything that we need to perform the audit. Nothing would change the unmodified opinion we've rendered. There were no consultations with other independent accountants, no other audit findings or issues or other matters to communicate. We also issue a management comment letter that has no comments, just has discussion items for future accounting standards that are coming up. The one that's expected to affect most governments is GASB 87 leases, which will be helping the IDA and implementing next year. And I'll skip ahead a little bit just to show you the financial results for both the entities combined, the IDA and Development Corporation. So total assets were 3.1 million. Most of that is in your cash and cash equivalents, 2.7 million. And then that is offset with your net position, 3.1 million. Total revenues were 2.7 million. Most of that within administrative fees. So a lot of new projects occurred during 2021. Then your total expenses were 554,000, bringing a change in that position 2.1 million. And that is all I plan on covering. If anyone has any additional questions on the audit process.
Thank you, Evan. I would just comment if anybody wanted to look at page 31 of your packet to get some sense of what the subject of the audit, the scope. We have a ton of projects out there. And if you look at the dates, we've been really busy recently. We've made quite a difference in the community in terms of economic development. So, but that also means there's a ton to look at. And Ina, I apologize. I meant to say you too, but there it is. I know you worked really hard on this. Do we need to formally accept the audit, Heather? Do we need a motion on this?
Yes.
All right, could I get a motion? Jeff moves. Is that John, your second?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the audit? Are we ready to vote? I will call the roll. Shauna?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And now my screen all moved. Let's see where, John?
Yeah.
Can't talk right now. I'm in Madison County campaigning with the congressman. What's up?
Oh, I just wondered if you have.
Okay, who do I need to mute?
Yeah,
Mike already figured it out and muted
There goes
himself.
Mike. We're on the campaign trail, apparently. John?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
And Mike?
Let me get out of the car here.
Okay. And the chair votes yes. So I believe that's unanimous. Again, thank you for all the work on that. Let's see, moving on to the next item is the BVSHF 3 project CHDF payment. And I believe this is the McKinley project at the base of State Street. And that is the Community Housing Development Fund payment. So is there anybody who wants to act on this?
We already acted on it in our last meeting. Is this an informational update or is there some kind of new proposal or what?
I think there was some interest in a motion to renew. But I don't know. I need somebody to make that motion if they wish to.
A motion to what?
To renew.
So there was some interest by Mike Sigler, who was not at the previous meeting, to bring this topic up to the IDA again at this meeting.
Without any substantive changes?
That's correct.
Yeah, so I wasn't here for that vote and neither was Rich John. So we were just, it didn't seem like there were just a bunch of people missing basically from the last vote, I think.
Yeah, but we had a quorum last time, didn't we?
I believe you did. But my understanding is a motion to renew is allowed if there is a motion put on the floor on that basis. And I think Mike, you're the one who would be eligible to do that.
I would like to do that at this point. So.
Okay. Is there a second to renew that motion?
Sure, I'll second it.
Okay, Jeff seconds.
I can read the motion from the last meeting,
Point
the
of order.
motion.
You can't do this.
I'm sorry.
Point of order, you cannot do this. We've already voted on it twice. You can't keep bringing it forward in hopes that you're going to get an affirmative vote.
I think we didn't vote on it the first time, didn't we?
We did actually.
Yeah,
This has
Right,
gone up
twice.
twice.
this would be the
Let's-
third meeting in which we would vote on
Let's
this.
get a ruling from council.
With no
I
change,
thought a motion to renew is allowed.
with no changes to the material.
This is Russ, if I may. You guys hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yes.
It's at the board's discretion if they want to reopen something, as Rich alluded to, and then recast the vote. Remember, this is a policy issue versus a true legal issue, compliance with law. And if the board wants to reconsider prior actions, it's at the board's discretion.
But, I mean, don't, we observe Robert's rules, no?
Yeah.
Yes,
So my understanding is that Robert's rules does not allow, specifically to avoid stability around minor changes in attendance between meetings, does not allow an issue to simply just be reconsidered without substantial changes.
Not a motion to reconsider, but a motion to renew, I believe, is allowed.
yes.
Can you articulate the difference between that?
Substantively, they're really not that different, but a motion to reconsider means you're bringing it up again as a new matter. A motion to renew, you're bringing up the same motion. And it's to address this kind of issue. A motion to reconsider, I don't believe is allowed, but a motion to renew is.
Or a motion
No new material?
you actually have to change.
Yeah, you're renewing the same vote, and it's to address this situation where people weren't there to vote.
So I mean, my reading of Robert's rules actually indicates that that's not allowed specifically to avoid this particular kind of issue. The only cases where it could be brought up would be if the motion was presented in a prior meeting. So we would have to have prior notice, or it would require a 2/3 majority vote to bring the issue back to the floor.
Yes.
I think that's a motion to reconsider.
Uh,
Motion to renew is majority vote.
I've been involved with labor law since 1988, and John said it perfectly there.
Yeah. Well, let's get advice from council. If
Yes.
this is certainly going to be contentious, I want to make sure we're proceeding correctly.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in Robert's rules as far as board proceedings go, and they apply differently to a true public body versus a quasi-public body, which is what the IDA is. So I will give the opinion that if you would like to reopen and have this readdressed, that's at the board's discretion. And if the board decides that they don't want to proceed that way, that's within your discretion.
So
There's no
what's,
bright line rule.
what's to stop somebody from just keep bringing up the same topic over and over in a meeting then? If there's, I mean, there's no closure to it if you don't have if you don't follow a set of rules, there's no closure to it.
Well, remember, there's nothing to stop the public from bringing forth requests on a multiple basis, which is what is happening here. So there's no, like I said, there's no bright line rule relative to whether or not you can reopen this. It's at the board's discretion if they want to reopen.
Okay, so we had a quorum at the last two meetings. It was voted down. Now it's going to be brought up again a third time, and it's legal
Yes,
with no change in substance.
correct.
You call
I
it
mean-
a quasi board, and I guess I question either it's Robert's rules or it's not. Either we're consistent or we're not. You can't pick and choose the rules that you like that support your cause whenever you're talking about Robert's rules, and then choose the ones that you don't like whenever you don't get the vote you want.
Yeah, Sean, I agree with that, but Robert's rules would appear to allow this. But let me ask Heather a question. With the vote at the last meeting, it appears there's some question whether financing will go forward on this project. And so it's substantive, but would we be able to wait a month and make this decision in May so that we could get a detailed decision, allow Russ to do some research and give us a definitive answer so there's more comfort among the board members, because I'm afraid we're going to have a very contentious decision here otherwise.
I think what Russ said, it's at the pleasure of the board. My understanding, and I've been using Robert's rules for over 30 years, is that a renewal motion, as long as, the board is approving it, what the stopgap is to keep you from continually bringing it back up is that the board votes no to renewing it.
Heather,
You have a
with all due
majority
respect,
that
that
says no.
that wasn't the question that Rich asked you. The question that Rich asked you is, can we table this for a month so that we can reach a level of certainty? And I think that's an important question to answer.
Yes, we can table it if someone wants to table it.
So whoever made the motion, Mike would have to rescind it.
Well, and John, further to your point is the fact that, remember, this is a policy and not law. Yes, we are subject to Robert's rules, but we have a policy that's been adopted, and if the board wants to vary from that policy for whatever reason, that's at the board's discretion, versus a project that either is subject to or not subject to the general municipal law. That's a different analysis. So it's at the board's discretion whether or not they want to reopen it.
I mean, that you raise another interesting issue here, Russ, which is my understanding is that if the IDA intends to vary from its policy, we need to notify the municipalities and the taxing jurisdictions that we plan to do so.
No, that's not true. It's a local policy that the board's adopted. And if you want to vary from a local policy, that's at the board's discretion.
I mean, we've gotten dinged at audit in the past for failing to notify the municipalities when we are planning to vary from our policy. That's something that's come up in audit.
And John, with all due respect, you're going to get dinged by the ABO and the for multiple things. So you can pick and choose what you want to get dinged for. And again, if this is something the board wants to consider, in my opinion, as your counsel, you could reconsider it. If you want to table it, that's up to you. But it's a policy, it's not law.
But we are supposed to notify the taxing jurisdictions if we plan to vary from our policy. Is that correct?
No.
So
If you want
let
to
me jump in here.
I believe it's a deviation from the standard pilot schedule
Right.
that we need to notify taxing jurisdictions.
right.
Mike has
And we
made the
can-
motion. John, hold up. Mike has made the motion. I would certainly like a chance to vote on this. I don't think we've ever had the vote with all the members here, and it's a pretty critical vote. And I think all the voices should be heard, but I'd like to make sure that everybody's comfortable procedurally that we're going down this pathway the right way. So I would ask Mike, would you consider tabling for a month? We'll put it on the agenda and everybody's going to know we're going to address this in 1 month. Is that?
Yeah, that's a reasonable request, Rich. Why? Yeah, I think that's a good path. I mean, obviously we want as little animosity as possible. So sure, if we can table it and get a ruling on it, that would be great.
Okay.
But I
Is
mean,
that
I would
okay
like
with
to vote on
everybody?
this again.
Can we
Yes?
make sure also that what exactly we are voting on is included in our agenda in advance? I think this appears as a one line with no documentation
I
on our
agree with you,
agenda.
John. Yeah, we
Um,
should do that.
And I'd like to ask that we do that for everything in the future. Like if we're going to vote on something, we did this with Travis Hyde too, where it was like, it wasn't even on the agenda. We really need to make sure that anything that we're going to be voting on, the board has clear documentation of what we are voting on so that we can adequately consider it. I think it's a part of our responsibility as board members to demand that.
I agree with you, John.
Right, you
And we
do.
can do that for the May meeting. We'll be clear on what the issue is. I think everybody understood it from this line item, but we can amplify it so members of the public would know as well. So let's revisit that in 1 month. I'm sure that's going to be a happy discussion. That would then take us to City Harbor. There is a request for amendment. Heather, do you want to cover that, or did you want to change order? I know you
No,
said something.
I can go ahead and introduce the topic. This project was approved in 2020 as the Phase 1 City Harbor project. They have gone back to the drawing board and included a Phase 2 in the project, which was always planned. They did their environmental approval for both Phase 1 and Phase 2 at the same time in 2020 from the city of Ithaca. You have in your packet a request for amendment for the original approval, again, which was provided in 2020. You can see the significant community benefits and public amenities that are being funded by this project, allowing waterfront access and waterfront activities to take place on this private parcel that has so much waterfront access. I am going to turn it over to the City Harbor team if you wanted to introduce who you have with you today. And I think they were going to give a brief overview of the changes to the project.
Hi, yes, my name's Jason Crane. I'm controller at Edger Enterprises of Elmira.
If you could stand closer to your mic, please.
Yeah, is that better?
Yes.
And I'm here with Jody and Jessica Edger, who are part owners of this project. And Heather, if you wouldn't mind giving David Reedman presentation.
Sure, would you, there we go.
We also have David Reedman.
Yes, we have.
And Ken Hall.
And Ken Hall from Reedman Companies. Elizabeth Ambrose, who's owner of Bridges and another owner, local at the, is unable to make the presentation today for personal reasons. So, you know, with that said, I'd like to begin with thanking the IDA for their support. And obviously, we're here today seeking an amendment to our approved pilot to include the third building we had originally planned in Phase 2. So I'd like to give a brief overview of the project. In front of you, you can see, excuse me, I'm going to talk about a brief project history and the related reasons for our request for this amendment. I'm going to give you a project status and progress made since the IDA approval of our existing pilot. Project highlights and public benefit improvements included in our plan. We have some renderings to show you today, and then we'll conclude. So to begin with, I wanted to discuss with you where we're at, why we're where we're at, and our plan moving forward. And that really will provide the reasons why we're here today seeking an amendment to our pilot. So when we originally planned this project, we had it in 2 phases. And the reason for that is mainly attributed, we had 156 units approved, but there was an ingress-egress issue to the site that prevented us. We could only build 100 units, or we had to add a second means of egress and ingress. And, you know, our thought was we wanted to get building this project sooner than later, so we decided to phase the project. And I'm happy to report that second means of ingress and egress has been resolved, and therefore why we're here today to get the approval for our entire project, which we're always going to be coming to you for the second phase. But, you know, now, you know, we want to build it all at once. And so, you know, we had a plan in place to do Phase 1. And unfortunately, as we all know, the pandemic occurred. And as a result of the pandemic, our project was put on hold. And, you know, you can imagine we were extremely disappointed at that fact. But really, and it's hard to believe it's been 2 years since we were in front of you last, but it's been 2 years, which obviously correlates with the length of this pandemic, and obviously why we're on a Zoom meeting rather than person. But, you know, with that said, the last 2 years have really given us the time to really analyze and study our development, and we've made improvements. And thus again, why we're here in front of you. And although it was disappointing, our plan is better today as a result. So during that time frame, the last 2 years, we realized, or I should say, we decided to go out and seek additional partnership to mitigate the risk of the city harbor team. And we brought on David Reedman, who's a successful developer out of Rochester, who specializes in multi-family apartment communities and has put forth many successful developments. And we asked him if he'd be interested in the project, and he was. And when he came aboard, he opened our eyes to the fact that we really couldn't build this in one phase anyways. And the reason for that was, the financial feasibility. It was a tight project, and the logistics of the site being so small prevented us from being able to build in phases. It was going to create safety issues, and so we determined that it really wasn't feasible just to build this in one phase as we had originally planned. And like I said, that the pandemic really, it's a terrible thing, but it was a blessing for this project because we were able to study it, and as a result, the plan's better today. And additionally, when we brought David on, he engaged Danter to do a market study of our project. And the result of that market study resulted in a change of our unit mix. This is another example of how we've improved the project. And what that did, and I think it's important to know, is we've reduced the number of 2-bedroom apartments in our mix and have increased the number of 1-bedroom units and studio units, which really makes the plan more affordable to the broader percentage of the population. So we thought that was really important to note to you. And again, because of the time we've had, this project's better. And, so just thought it was really important to just give you a brief history of where we are at, why we're where we're at, and our plan to move forward. So that concludes a brief history of the project and why we're in front of you today. I'd like to now discuss, the project status, the progress we've made since you've approved our pilot. And so, what have we accomplished? Again, it's hard to believe that it's been over 2 years since you've approved our pilot. And we've been working on this project for 5 years, and we're really proud of what the project's turned out to be, and in addition, what we've accomplished. So I just thought it was important to let you know what we've accomplished. And, the first thing on the list is, you all know, and I, encourage you to go to the site and take a look at it, and you can see what we've accomplished. But the biggest thing is Guthrie MOB is been complete and it's open. This development team in collaboration with the city and the IDA has created another medical choice that's walkable for the people in the city of Ithaca, and we're pretty proud of that. We've completed the seawall and the docks. And another important thing that we've done that relates to the environment is we've completed the effluent water connection. And those of you who were here when we made our original presentation 2 years ago, we had quite a lengthy discussion of what the effluent water system was and is. And so I'm just going to give you a brief description again, because I think it's really important, because it's really cutting edge technology that we're putting in place. And I'm happy to report, by the way, that Guthrie is currently using that system. And so just as a quick summary again of just the fluid-based heat pump system, which you can see there's a storyboard up here. But just to summarize, it's a heat pump system that uses 48-degree wastewater effluent discharge as a heat source in the winter and sink in the summer. And the benefits of the system relative to a normal heat pump system is low energy use. It uses an estimate of 50% less electric compared to the conventional heat pumps. And, therefore it has a low environmental impact and obviously no fossil fuel in the system. And we're really proud that this development is engaged in this cutting edge technology, and City Harbor is going to benefit, and so is the city and the citizens. And, excuse me, with that said, we're doing our part for the environment, and it's at the end of the day, it's significantly more expensive than a traditional system. But so we felt it's important to mention that again, and that really is a quick overview of what we've accomplished since we last met with you. Now, I'd like to address what Heather started with all the public benefits that we're going to be providing with this project. And it's really extraordinary is the best way I can describe it, compared to what most developments do. We, and again, we're really, really proud of this project and what it's going to deliver to the city of Ithaca and its citizens when it's complete. And so we are investing $3.5 million in public benefit improvements. And if you look at your letter, you'll see in your letter that we got that documented on page 2 and 3. But I'm just going to go over a few of them here with you folks. And I've already spoken to you about the influent infrastructure for the heating and cooling, where we've made improvements to the domestic and fire water loop that now make that site more developable in the future, because now the buildings can be sprinkled with more water pressure. And so we made a significant investment to be able to implement the domestic and fire water loop. Well, there's various public road improvements. We have an agreement with the city on Pier Road to work on that road and provide trees and shrubbery. We have the 1,700-foot public promenade that's going to connect to the Cuba waterfront trail. And again, I hate being repetitive, but we're really proud of the fact that that's going to be accessible to anybody who wants to go on that site, and they can enjoy the views of the site and the water, because excuse me, there's going to be paddle parks, pocket parks within the site. We're going to have a dog park, public outdoor seating, and dining at our cafe that's going to be in the building. There's going to be a marina center, bathrooms, showers, a kayak launch, and a kayak storage. And we're going to have a transportation hub there. We call it our mobility hub, which includes bus stops, ride share. We're going to have electric charging stations in our plan, a bike share, electric bikes, normal bikes. You all remember the line bikes. Hopefully they'll be coming back soon, and they'll be on our site. And we also want to mention we've committed $500,000 to the Route 13 corridor improvements, which basically work on the intersection of Route 13 and the entranceway of Willow Drive. And that money is in escrow with our attorneys and committed to the city for those improvements. So I wanted to go over a lot of highlight a lot of those public benefits. And again, with that said, we're extremely proud of that. Now, in conclusion, And really the conclusion is exactly what we've written in our letter. That, City Harbor's multi-use development plan supports the objectives of the city, county, and other local groups to improve the waterfront access and infrastructure for public enjoyment, to support tourism in our area, to create jobs, and to provide access to a walkable medical care within the city limits. The project meets all 6 of the goals of the city of Ithaca's waterfront plan. Again, they're listed in the letter, but I think it's important to note, there's additional growth and retention of people looking to live in the city. Additional housing will provide opportunities for people of all income, ages, abilities to live in the city. Enhanced green spaces. Housing along the waterfront provides opportunities for people to live within walking distance of major employers and do the public transit mentioned, which may reduce commuter traffic. An increased tax base will obviously reduce the tax burden for all residents. And the waterfront will create an economically vibrant residential commercial district and really spark the development on the rest of the waterfront. So, we're extremely excited about completing this transformational project for the benefit of all. And again, are seeking your support to bring this incredible project to fruition. We look forward to discussing the current plans with you and answering any questions you might have. And that concludes what I have to say. I don't know if any of the other members, Jody, Jessica, or David, have anything to add, but we just thought it was important to give you a brief overview of where we're at, why we're where we're at. And we're really, again, we're seeking your help to get this done, because at the end of the day, we can't do it without you. We appreciate your previous support and hope to have your support for this project. We think the project's going to take about 2 years. We are in the final stages of planning board approval. We hope to have it approved in May and June, and so that we can start construction in the fall. And you're going to be a big part of whether that plan comes to fruition. So again, I thank you all for your time and appreciate the consideration.
Thank you. And just for clarity, you did receive approval for phase 1, but you've gone back because you want to proceed with phase 1 and 2 together now. Is that the case?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And you do have in your packet, on page 43, I revised the projected incentives. Some of you that looked at the numbers may notice that their numbers are a little bit different than mine. My projected tax payment and tax abatements are a little bit different. So in case anyone was wondering that, you also have the original that was approved. This will need to go to a public hearing because the additional incentive is more than $100,000. So what we'd be looking for today is moving this on to a public hearing.
Okay. I see John has his hand up. John?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead and move to send this to public hearing. Really, my only substantial question is that my understanding is that there's been some back and forth. In the original application, there was some, like a new clubhouse for the golf club or something like that, that's now been pulled out, and there's been something of a kerfuffle about that. Can you just speak to that? Like what happened there? What's the status of that?
I can.
Before we get there, could I get a second on the motion just so it's on the floor properly?
I'll second it.
Jeff, seconds. Thanks. Okay, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
David Reedman, thanks for everyone's time. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here. So the Newman Center on this plan that's in front of you is the white building footprint. The site plan that you're seeing here with respect to phase 1, which is, if you think about it, there was if you can see my mouse, there was a phasing line right between what was called Point East 1 and Point East 2. That site plan for phase 1, where the parking is, we've made some small modifications to the configuration of this loop in front of Point West, but that site plan has not changed. Quite frankly, we've remained open to dialogue, interest in pursuing some different solution for the existing Newman Center, but The reality is that we have no form of site control. No, we don't own it. We don't have a lease on it. We have absolutely nothing. So it's very difficult for us to propose anything. And certainly to invest any dollars on a piece of property we have absolutely no control over. We've expressed that to the city numerous times. We've expressed that to Friends of Newman numerous times. So we stand at the ready as an important stakeholder with what we're doing. And as you can see, the planning of this would accommodate doing something either in the current location. As part of this project, we're going to be relocating this 9th green, shortening up the holes. So there could be an opportunity to build here as well. But those conversations really are dependent on some sort of license, lease, conveyance of property, something to convey site control to us.
Okay. At this point, any other questions or comments? Are we ready to vote to send this to public hearing?
Yeah, question,
Yeah, who's that?
Todd.
Todd, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious. First of all, I'd like to commend you guys for the all your environmental goals and stuff that you're doing with this project. With the heat pumps and stuff, you're really using, great technology, and I applaud you for that. And that's great. I'm just curious since we'll be doing, you want to redo this package now and do both phases at once. Would you consider, I know we changed the local labor policy in January. Would you consider going with the current local labor policy of 75% local labor? Would you be willing to entertain that?
So it's obviously in our best interest to source labor and materials as close to the project as possible, right? And logic would suggest that the less distance to travel, the better it's going to be. So we will strive to achieve as high a percentage as possible. Having said that, there might be some materials or some products that are difficult to procure. And so we'll just work through that. But I think it's in our interest, and Jody can certainly speak to that as well, but it's in our interest to procure as much labor and material as in close proximity to the project as possible.
I agree with David, but in reality, there's going to be things that may not be able to be sourced locally. There's 7 counties that you have currently in the local labor pool. But things like steel, prefab wall panels, there's going to be things that just aren't produced or manufactured in that area. But as David said, we will certainly do our part in our due diligence to try to meet or exceed that goal.
That means a lot. Thank you. And I'm just curious too, what would the average rent be on these places too? I know before I said like $19.50 for a studio. Has any of that changed?
So we've actually done quite a bit of planning. One of the accomplishments of what we've accomplished in the last 2 years that Jason didn't mention is a lot of planning. Obviously, with respect to Pointies 2, I think it's allowed us to really tighten up what the public promenade looks like, get it all done at one time. But on top of that, a lot of those planning efforts were driven by a market study. And one of the things that's really changed, we've actually introduced studio apartments that were not in the previous plan. Our 1-bedroom and studio apartments now account for 24% of the unit mix. They previously accounted for 17%. By getting some smaller apartments, as Jason mentioned earlier, that's going to allow us to reach a broader section of the population, but I think the rents are going to start at around $900 for the smaller studio apartment, correct?
Okay, great.
900 or 1900?
And the smaller studio apartments, they will probably start, actually, I have that written right here. Excuse me, 1,500
Okay,
is what we're looking at on the smaller studio apartments. I
Okay, thank
apologize
you.
for
Shauna.
Thank you. I just wanted to know if the waterfront sidewalk will be accessible to the public, or will there be a private area?
there are going to be some, and I don't know if we want to pull that rendering back up. Maybe somehow, can I? No.
Yep, you can.
Okay. So actually there is, so there are some areas, I don't know if you can see my cursor, in front of the buildings that might be private for residents, but there are a lot of areas. So this public promenade has turned from just a wide walkway to a lot of, quote unquote plaza areas. So this area up here on the west end of the Point West building is a restaurant with a lot of outdoor dining spaces. Jason mentioned kayak areas, launch areas, storage areas. So throughout the entire 1,700 feet of this promenade, there are a lot of public plaza areas, restaurant areas, entertainment areas, paddle launch areas. There's it has really grown in scope from what was originally shown in the previous approval, and part of that is a function of a lot of planning, because now you can look at the whole project and get everything done at once.
So I guess what I'm asking is the gray trail that is close to the lake, is that
Yes.
going to be public?
That's all public, and so my point is, not only is that public, but some of the red areas that are adjacent to it are public as well, correct?
Okay, and are the boat slips, are those going to be for rent? Are those going to be private, or can boats dock there?
Those are for rent, and for rent by anyone, whether you're a resident of City Harbor or a resident of the city of Ithaca, or quite frankly, beyond. I think, Jody, you're probably better.
Yeah, there's going to be a few transient slips in front of what we call Point West, Shauna, right at the point there. There'll be a few transient slips in and out for restaurant and visitors. There's 110 slips total. And it's, as David said, it's either open to the public to rent or to our residents, but there will be some public spaces for transient boating.
It looks like you've got 10 visitor boat slips in your plan on page 39.
Okay, and then the last question I have is your trail, are those handicap accessible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
As is the
Kayak.
as is this configuration here for the kayak launch. The reason it Z's like that is for handicapped accessibility.
Okay, and can the public use the kayak launch?
Yes.
That is a public improvement. This is not even on our property, correct?
Okay, great, thank you.
And I think it's important to note related to that, we also have a grant that we're in that area. There'll be a paddle park and a floaty type dock that will be accessible for anybody to go there and swim as well off our property. And also, you can see the green areas. There's parks embedded in there, and there's going to be benches along the trail that people can sit and enjoy and eat their lunch in the parks that we have embedded in this site as well. So, again, we've really worked hard to create a lot of public amenities, and which we're proud of, and it meets the objectives of the city relative to waterfront development. And we're glad to be the leader and an example in that regard for for all those who follow us.
We also paid attention to Jason's point, if you're coming in off of a boat, you don't live at City Harbor, well, maybe you want to, get off the boat and sit at a table and have lunch or what have you. So this plan doesn't do it justice. It's the scale is too small, but there are a lot of little pockets in these areas where there's just, great space to sit down if you get off the boat or before you get on the boat or what have you. So.
Okay, I was going to make a comment or a couple comments. One is my wife and I walked down there recently and looked at the Guthrie building and the build out around that space and into where phase 1 and phase 2 are. Well, now phase 1, I guess. But if any of the IDA members want to go down there, in the area next to the Guthrie parking lot, there are tables already up, and it looks pretty nice. This is going to be a significant change and improvement in terms of public access and the quality of what's there. My other comment, it goes back in history, which is that one of the signal changes in the city of Ithaca was the construction of Route 13 back in the early 60s, late 50s. And certainly Route 13 did a lot of important things for allowing traffic to move in and around the city, but it also acts as a wall. And if you really look at a map of the city, what's happened is that most of the activity and housing and everything else is separated from the lake. That Route 13 divides the city from Cayuga Lake, which is just a gorgeous asset. And this project, I think, is a signal that we're moving beyond that we are adapting to what was built in the 1960s and actually moving people far closer to the lake. I see this as a really positive development in terms of creating a brand new neighborhood. So I find it pretty exciting. I find the energy component really exciting. And so I am in support. I certainly will vote for this going to public hearing. Does anybody else wish to be heard before we go to a vote? Seeing none, I'll call the roll and I'll do it in order. Shauna.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
Todd.
Yes.
Faith.
Yes.
And where's John?
Yes.
And Mike? Did we lose Mike? I don't see him on screen. And the chair votes yes. So I think,
Oh, sorry, Mike's coming back in.
oh, okay.
He was the second on this, right? I think he was probably going to vote for it.
Yeah. Hi, Mike.
Do you need my second on this? Yeah,
No,
sorry. I
you
got
seconded
bumped
it.
out.
But
already
would you like to
seconded.
vote to send it to a public hearing now?
Sorry, yes, I would like to vote yes on that.
Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you for the presentation, and we'll get a public hearing scheduled. We'll see what the public has to say.
Thank you
So
very much.
good stuff.
Thank
All right.
you.
Okay, and then moving on, the next item on our agenda is broadband support request. And I believe you have a memorandum in your packet from Kurt Anderson. And I would either Heather or Kurt, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, so I'm just going to introduce Kurt Anderson and Chuck Schwerin on my team at IAED, and I'm going to let them take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Thanks, Rich, and the IDA board members. Effectively, you see in your packet, IAED wrote a grant in early 2020, received it in late 2020 to simply run a line from Ithaca to the former Cayuga Operating Company coal plant. Obviously, a lot has happened between now and then. One of those small things being COVID. We've realized really that broadband is just as critical an infrastructure as water, sewer, roads, et cetera. Chuck and I, through a long process, tapped the brakes a little bit, hired a national consultant. We went out to RFP. We interviewed those applicants, negotiated what we think is a really good deal for the community. It includes the benefits you see in your packet that were mentioned in the letters of support submitted and entered into the public comment at the first part of this meeting. 56 miles of broadband, unserved houses at their own dime. We're working with Dryden to make sure their needs are met. They've been very supportive of this project, et cetera, et cetera. Through that time, we've also heard through regular communications from the community about the concerns regarding the potential plans for that site. Through a lot of discussions internally and again with community partners, we ultimately decided to cleave relations with Cuga Data Juice, which is the owner of that site, which is the parent company is a publicly traded Bitcoin mining company. They have asserted from the beginning and to this day that that's not their plan for the site. There's a myriad of reasons why it's not an ideal site for that purpose. However, we can't predict what will happen in the future, but we don't want to lose what effectively was lightning in a bottle. We got a great grant, a federal infrastructure grant, which this group, I should say the TCDC board, but many of you crossover or did at that time at the April 8th, 2020 meeting, agreed to provide some of the match that was required to secure that grant. By cleaving relations with Data Juice, we have now a hole of $350,000 and we are at the go point. We have a draft term sheet that's ready for review by the ARC. They've already offered preliminary approval. We're ready to go on a project that will probably take about, they said 12 months. Our preferred vendor has indicated 12 months. We're at, we've buffered it to 18 months. So we are really at a point that we're ready to go. Unfortunately, it's also the same point where we have a $350,000 hole. We have had conversations with 5 different community foundations or philanthropic organizations regarding funding this project. Unfortunately, it just, outside of rural poverty, which was a real stretch for them, they just couldn't see it and really weren't offering to go any higher than $10,000. And it's just not enough to plug that gap and make this project go. So again, we've disassociated from Data Juice. To meet the terms of the grant, we still have to run it that direction, though we have agreed that we are not going to connect that facility. But to deliver all the community benefit that's outlined in your packet, that you've heard in the letters, to actually do something about broadband, we need to plug that $350,000 gap ASAP, and that's why we're here today.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Any hands? Oh, Todd, I see you.
Yeah, I'd like to, should this be a motion to spend money out of the budget then? Or is it?
Yeah, I believe if somebody wanted to make that motion, Heather,
I'll
that's what
entertain
you're
that
looking
motion.
for, right? This would come out of fund balance.
Yeah, I would
Yes,
entertain
that
that
would be the
motion.
motion.
I
You
would
want to
entertain
make
the
that,
motion.
Todd?
Yes, please.
And is there anybody who wishes to second?
I'll second it.
Okay, I see Jeff there. Okay, and Shauna, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I have read through the material. I've seen the map, and I am very concerned that this is paving a path for a connection for data mining at the Lansing coal site. Is there any guarantee that can be provided that we can control who the lines are leased to?
Kurt?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Chuck on that. So Chuck has, we thought about that too. One of the conflating parts before I hand it to Chuck is that we, IAED, for a period of 20 years will have lease rights on only half of the line. So only one direction from that line. So we have thought about that. Chuck consulted with our council regarding, and actually did research on what is or has not been done elsewhere. And I'll cede the floor to him for that.
I mean, the simple answer is, as Kurt said, that we control sort of 50% of the access. Control is in air quotes. We are, in leasing to a private entity, an ISP, our preferred, provider. They are a for-profit organization and are free to sell their services to whomever they wish. IAED or the TCIDA Foundation is not a regulatory body. So the judgment from our council was that if it is to be regulated, it should be regulated by the county or the state, not by a nonprofit that has no sort of mechanism for doing that kind of accountability. The other thing is it's simply infeasible because of the redundancy. Whomever chooses to do what is still legal can tap into either one of those lines, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it.
Okay. All right. Shauna, did you have more?
Yeah, I do have more. For those reasons, I think this is a very slippery slope. And I understand that it's appealing to municipalities to provide broadband to families that don't have it. But I see this as a pathway for data mining. And I absolutely do not want to be a part of that, or make it easier for organizations to do that in our county. So I will be voting against this.
Okay, is there anybody else who wishes to speak? John?
Yeah, I also take some issue with this proposal. And I've spent a fair bit of time thinking about it and discussing it with Chuck at length. Chuck, I appreciate your time. And I have two issues. One is that I think that, basically what's happened here is that, this operator, needs a fiber in order to build their data center there. They were originally going to pay the entire cost of that fiber, $800,000. We contributed some money under the with the clear statement from them in our meeting when we were considering the grant request that it would not be used for Bitcoin. We contributed $50,000 to get that grant for them. And then, of course, now we're contributing another $350,000. We're basically we pulled an entire $800,000 cost off of their development cost to build a facility that will do industrial scale Bitcoin mining. I can't see how that actually makes sense for us to support. And I think that a lot of these adjacent community benefits are just benefits. I kind of take issue with the fact that we can't prevent the use of the northern route, but there's no reason we can't put a provision in the lease for the fiber that it can't be used for a specific purpose. That seems to be within, this is a commercial lease for an asset that we will own.
Just as a point of information, John, I did check with the ISP and asked if, in their experience, have they ever seen a situation where a particular utilization of their fiber could be sort of controlled? And he said only in the case where it's illegal, such as child pornography, for example. And then there's a mechanism for doing that.
The fact that they've never seen it does not make it impossible. I hear you, right? It's complexity. But at the same time, we were facing an existential crisis, and Bitcoin mining on this scale is making it far worse. I think that it's important for us to consider taking radical action, taking new action in order to protect our children's futures. Absent a provision in the lease that this can't be used for industrial scale Bitcoining, I'm not talking about whether or not we're going to check if anybody's doing it in their basement or on a computer or two in their facility. I'm saying a provision that prevents utilization of this facility for industrial scale Bitcoin mining. That is pretty obvious whether or not it's happening. Hopefully it won't come down to us having to have a conversation about it. But if it does, we have assets, we have attorneys, we are certainly prepared to defend ourselves. And further, I also wonder if we are actually even the correct source for this fiber at all, considering that, when it was to support an industrial operation, there was a jobs benefit. It was clearly aligned with the the IDA mission. Without that, it's a residential broadband, which really actually feels like it would be more appropriately funded by an organization like the county or something else. So for all of those reasons, I cannot vote for this proposal.
Just another point of information, when we did the application to ARC, we did do an economic benefit analysis from an economic geographer from Cornell, who looked at the impact for both residential as well as commercial interconnectivity. So those were benefits that were certainly called out in the application that were far more than just residential.
I'm
Thank
going to
you.
jump in for 1 second on your first point, John. Just one record correction. The only time that this idea came before this group of which you were a part, which is actually the TCDC, was April 8th of 2020. And nowhere in that conversation did anyone address Bitcoin mining or cryptocurrency mining. The actual consideration, the concern at that time was affordability, that we could ensure affordability to rural addresses. And in the term sheet includes not only participation in the ACP, but also commitment to offer bulk rate discount services to households that income qualify. So we did address the one concern that was raised in April 8th meeting, which is available on YouTube. But second, I would support Chuck's point that we really are the wrong entity to be regulating that. The idea of separating industrial from residential Bitcoin mining sounds good on paper, but in practice, it's very difficult to split hairs between cryptocurrency, proof of work, and even further to discriminate against one user and not someone else along the line. So even just to catch it would be difficult enough, let alone any enforcement on that. So it's just really, we're the wrong body for that.
With all due respect,
John, let me get control of this meeting. You can circle around again. I'd like to give Mike Sigler a chance to speak.
All right, thanks, John. I just wanted to point out this one thing. We keep talking about the power plant as if it's still a power plant, and it isn't. It's just a building at this point. It doesn't, under the two arguments I just heard from both John and Shauna, frankly, we wouldn't build any broadband anywhere because it's the broadband that's kind of important. And we all agree that we should put broadband out, more of it, right? But like they just opened a huge Bitcoin mining operation in Waverly, New York. Why Waverly? I don't really know why. There was broadband, I suppose, but they're buying market rate power to power that Bitcoin operation. And if the power plant wanted to do that, I suppose they could buy market rate power, but it's not like they're generating energy at the power plant that's going to run this system. They're going to have to buy market rate power like anybody else who wants to mine Bitcoin. Frankly, if you wanted to do it, I would open one in Groton where they have cheaper power, or Watkins Glen. So the argument that somehow this is going to encourage Bitcoin mining operation, well, you could make that argument for any broadband that you're putting anywhere in the country. This is a huge benefit that the town of Lansing, I'm all in favor of this. It's because, like I said, they might power plant powered by natural gas. They could set up a Bitcoin mining operation and use that power generation there. And then they wouldn't have to pay market rate. They pay whatever the power from the natural gas costs. That's, I think, a bigger threat than this building that is no longer a power plant, does not have generators. They do have a permit to draw water from the lake for cooling, as does Cornell University for their cooling system. But that's not how you cool Bitcoin mining, apparently. It's not really that effective of a cooling mechanism. They would rather use electricity. And they're going to be buying market rate just like you do for your home or any other industry does for their home. I don't know what the break point of a profit is there, but that's because I'm not a Bitcoin miner. So
okay,
as far as I know, they want it to be a data center, but they're not going to sign off that option to do something else if it proves profitable, just like no other business would, anywhere in the country, not just this specific location. It really does seem like we're singling out this singular location because it used to be a power plant, which it no longer is.
Yeah. Okay. Todd.
Thank you. Just for great points by everybody. And I'm big, like John said, about the, creating jobs with the industry. With this broadband, if we did put it in, I mean, it's going to help. It's going to help people that are now working remotely. It's going to help bring businesses into the area is the way I'm looking at it, which will hopefully employ more people. I'm looking at it as a tool to help us recruit more businesses here. And I understand what John mentioned about, maybe it should be from a different source, bringing the money in, but I think this is a tool we can use to help bring more jobs to the area with this broadband. Russ, is there a legal way we can require, based on the money that we're given for this broadband, that it doesn't go toward Bitcoin? Is there a legal way?
Yeah, I was gonna chime in, but I know there's a lot of hands raised, and I'll be brief. And to Kurt and Chuck's point is, yes, contractually we can say you can't Bitcoin, but how do you enforce it? And what is the process for doing that? So you could have a piece of paper that says you can't use the infrastructure for Bitcoining, but again, how do you enforce that?
So how do we enforce any rules that we have then, Russ? Is there is there a
Well,
way?
no, that's a little bit different, Todd, in the sense that if a project beneficiary doesn't make a pilot payment, they're in default. We put them back on the tax rolls. Or if they spend more sales tax exemption that was approved, we have the legal obligation to recapture. This is a whole new world that John and Chuck and Shauna and Kurt can speak to better than can I. But I don't know how we could have a piece of paper that says you can't use it for Bitcoining, but I don't know how you would ever enforce that, honestly.
If there's a state law to either pause or prevent mining in this state, that could be enforced. That is probably an appropriate way to go about it if that's the mood of the legislature. And Assembly Member Kellis is contemplating doing just that. That would satisfy, I think, Shauna's concern, regardless of whether it was the plant doing it or Russ in his basement. And I take John's point about, no, he's only interested in industrial strength, but what's the definition of industrial strength? Who's defining that? Is that our responsibility? Is it your responsibility? That I don't know that definition, exists or if it's feasible, to enforce.
Okay. I have Jeff and John, and then I'd like to make a comment. So Jeff, why don't you go ahead?
So through my role in IAED, being on the board there, I've been on kind of the ground with this and seeing Kurt and Chuck kind of with the initial phase and then kind of weaving and going through twists and turns and everything like that to try and get this project to fruition. So I do need to compliment you on that and all of the items and ideas that you brought up. In terms of all the benefits, I will vote for this. I just feel like the ability to bring broadband to the rural area and the benefits that it's going to give Dryden and Lansing are just so great that we don't know what this old power plant is going to be. Yes, they have said that they will not eliminate doing Bitcoining, but at the end of the day, we just don't know what they're going to do. And honestly, we don't have any control over the of the line coming from the north, which they certainly could hook up to as well. So I just feel like the benefits so outweigh our ability to even try and control what they may or may not do with that facility that I will vote for it. Kurt, one thing I would like to ask you is I believe in our conversations you had mentioned that the facility doesn't even have the power allocation at this point to even contemplate doing this. Is that to do Bitcoining at the current level? Is that correct?
Well, it's certainly not ideal. So currently their power allocation is 50 megawatts. There are other sites and in general, other sites that are outside of this company operate between 300 and 400 megawatts. One kind of technological point that when it comes to Bitcoin mining, it's not the volume of internet service they need. You could do that on most any hardline or broadband infrastructure. It's the power that controls what they're able to do, which we have no control over. Anyone from their house could be doing it as long as they have power. It's not the volume of space used on the actual fiber itself.
Yeah. Okay. John, and then Faith, and then I'll take a turn. Go ahead, John.
sorry, was muted. To Mike's point about, right, this was just a building. I think that it's important to understand that because of the historical use as a power plant, this building has something that is unique to it, which is the power infrastructure, allocation aside, to push hundreds of megawatts of power from the grid to this building, right? There are essentially lines that are built because it was a generating facility. Now, while they only have 50 megawatts allocated today, that certainly could change at any time. And your average anywhere else on this fiber run or most other places in New York State would have to spend, large amounts of money in order to build that power infrastructure, which, as Kurt pointed out, is the thing that's necessary to make it attractive for Bitcoining. So I think that that's something that does actually make this site unique in its potential for causing environmental damage. And I think that the other thing that's I don't think that it's hard for us to determine the difference between industrial and residential scale Bitcoin mining. I mean, this is I guess it might take a little bit of work on Russ's part to draft some language. But I mean, we're talking about the difference between somebody using, with 100 amp electric service at, 200 volts versus an electric service that runs at tens of thousands of volts and, megawatt scale. I mean, this is just it's wildly different. It should be easy to tell if it's happening. When these things happen, there are news articles that say, the Weitzman guy is building a giant array down in Binghamton. I mean, it's it won't be hard to know it's happening. It won't be hard to tell the difference between this and anything else. And it seems like a relatively small concession to put something in the lease of the fiber that would, put the operator in default if they interconnect an industrial scale cryptocurrency operation to it. We could simply say that the lease would be terminated. We could make them pay us back the 400,000. There are lots of options with just a little bit of creativity. And if we were to insert such a provision in the lease, this would have my vote. I actually think this is a great project for all of the reasons that you've outlined. And it doesn't seem like asking that much to just say let's prevent it from being interconnected to an industrial facility that's doing nothing but making a small number of people wildly rich at the cost of profound environmental damage. So, I would like to actually move offer an amendment to the motion on the floor that we would include such provision in the lease.
John, could you hold your amendment just for a minute so we could hear from Faith first?
Sure.
That'd be all right. Go ahead, Faith.
So I agree with what John is saying right now, but I also just wanted to remind, I think we get caught up. I used to be the broadband girl, right, on the federal level. So it was but way before any of these topics came up. But an ARC grant is difficult to get. I want to bring that up. I want to say that, I am having lived it with Kurt, it is definitely, there are things that had to happen in order for this to get to the point that it's at now. And I should be very, very proud of that. I really don't want to give back the money, as I'm sure we all will say. We should not give back this money. Very difficult to get it again if we ever were to do that. And the cost that you're talking about is amazing. Having written a $21 million grant for broadband that didn't even compare to the mileage and everything else. So, whoever the ISP is and whatever's going on, I mean, it really is a great price. So felt like I needed to say that aside from what the Bitcoin stuff is going on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could make a comment, I am no fan of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. I would recommend a book called American Kingpin to everybody here about somebody who set up a business on the dark web, and it was really enabled by Bitcoin, that there was no way to run that kind of illegal business without cryptocurrency. And you add the environmental damage, it's a mess. It is a mess that needs to be addressed on the state and national level. And I am really skeptical that we as an IDA in Tompkins County are going to be able to actually make any appreciable difference. I see this as a remarkable amount of leverage for economic development with our payment from the IDA that's proposed to get a tremendous amount. And I can tell you that on the county legislature, broadband outside of the city of Ithaca, I represent the city, I have broadband, but this is an issue. And the pandemic really brought it home that the people who don't live in the city have a lot of issues they're excluded from because they just cannot connect. This would solve a lot of that for a lot of people and enable growth for the town of Dryden to serve its people in a really creative way. I think it's worth the risk that possibly this company would try to develop a power source so that they could tap into this broadband line. But I don't know why they do it here rather than somewhere else, frankly, if they have to pay market rate. And they would need state approval to reopen that site as a power plant. Hopefully, New York State would properly regulate what they were trying to do with cryptocurrency. But I'm going to support the proposal as it stands. But John, you wanted to make an amendment? Why don't you go ahead, or
I want to propose an amendment that the lease on the fiber facility contain a provision that would place any operator in default of their lease with substantial financial consequences if they interconnect to an industrial scale proof of work cryptocurrency operation.
Okay, do we have a second?
There's a main motion on the floor.
Right.
Yes, I'm proposing to amend that motion.
But the main motion needs to be voted up or down before there can be an alternate motion.
No,
this isn't an
All right,
alternate motion, it's an amendment.
John, stop. I'll manage it. No,
Fair
you
enough.
can amend. You can amend the main motion. And
No.
it looked like Shauna, you were seconding. Okay, and you wanted to speak?
Yeah, whenever John was speaking about his proposal, I did see the attorney nodding his head. And I just wanted to get the attorney's opinion in regards to drafting that up.
Yeah, Shauna, it's Russ. Like I said, we can put language within the documents that can, at least optically, from my view, protect the agency from crypto mining and Bitcoin mining. Whether or not you can actually act upon those, I don't know. It's a whole new world, like I said. So we can have language in the documents that optically are there, but whether or not they're enforceable like our traditional default provisions that we're accustomed to, I just don't know.
If I could ask a question, if we were to do something like that, would we be subject to litigation that we were singling out a particular broadband user and not others?
Well, I mean, Rich, you're a retired attorney. You're always subject to litigation. So the answer is yes. You could potentially be subject to litigation for all sorts of things. You can be sued for anything, as you know.
Yes, but I guess it's whether there's a discriminatory intent here at the beginning. But it sounds like that would be one of the risks we'd carry if we put that language in. Todd?
Since I made that motion, I'd be willing to amend it. To go with what John and Shauna went with.
Okay, well, we're going to vote on the amendment, but it sounds like you support that. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the amendment?
And so I'll be very brief. Sorry. What I will do, depending upon what the board's pleasure is relative to this issue, is I will speak with some of my partners that are more corporate oriented and involved in this industry, and share with the board and staff language that we propose and get feedback before we actually incorporate it into the lease.
And Russ, if there was a litigation, who would the defendant be? The foundation? not not the IDA.
Well, Chuck, to answer your question, anybody can sue anybody. So I don't have an answer for that.
I would suspect we would get sued because you'd name all the parties that
Right.
touched it in any way, but
That's
that's
exactly
the
right.
risk we'd carry. Yeah. Todd, do you have your hand up?
No, sorry.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to the amendment? Are we ready to vote? I'll call the roll. Todd,
Yes,
let's see, Jeff,
No.
Faith,
Yes.
okay, Shauna,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mike,
No.
and the chair votes no, but I believe we have 4-3, it passes. Okay, and then we're back on the main motion as amended. And does anybody wish to speak further? Are we ready to vote? I will call the roll. Oh,
Can I
Heather?
just clarify? So the IDA is being asked to provide funding to IAED's foundation that will be entering into a lease with a service provider, and the IDA wants it a condition of that lease.
That's correct.
Okay, and I want to be very clear about the definition of industrial cryptocurrency mining, because my team and I have, done lots and lots of research, and there actually is not a definition. And this body ended up in a 3-year-long fight with Ken Schoen over the definition of net rent that was thrown into a resolution at the very 9th hour. And it was not fun. So I would like Russ to be able to provide
understand.
some definition of
Was it nice?
industrial
Huh? Was it
scale
nice? Oh, He said,
cryptocurrency.
come on in, sit down.
Any facility that draws more than
I gotta use the
200
restroom.
amps of
Hold on
Hold on
power.
one second. Mike, could you go on mute?
Oh, so
Okay, go ahead, John.
You just say any facility that draws more than 200 amps of power. I mean, that's standard, like residential or small commercial interconnect.
It does sound like
So
we're gonna
if
need
the
to try to
Lansing
draft
High
language,
School
Heather.
wanted to connect
Yeah,
and they
And-
were drawing
and-
more than 200 amps of power, they couldn't?
And they're using it to mine Bitcoin?
Well, no, okay.
well, if you're gonna have a bright line rule like amperage, I don't know that you can go into people's houses and determine what are they doing with the computing power, but different issue. And we voted on the amendment, it passed, so that's what's before us. I think we're gonna need to depend on Russ to bring us some language to look at. But there we are. Jeff, you want to speak to the
Yeah.
main motion?
I was just going to comment that, obviously with that amendment there, that's going to throw it back into TCID Foundation's court, where if this opens us up to litigation, then the TCID Foundation, which obviously doesn't have much funding, I think would be concerned about even potentially being able to go through this project if it's going to open them up to litigation.
I mean, I think to Russ's point, right, you can be sued for literally anything. I think there's a very low risk that you're going to get sued for this. But, that's you.
Well, perhaps, John, but it is clear that we would be assuming a risk that we would not otherwise have.
No, you wouldn't be assuming the risk. IAED's foundation would be assuming the risk.
Well, the IDA would probably get sued too, but regardless, there is some assumption of risk here in trying to, but we voted on it, so there
Right,
it
we
is.
voted on it, it's passed.
Yeah. So is there any further comment on the main motion? Are we ready to vote? And I know that some of us are late to other appointments, so we probably should proceed to vote, but I don't want to close anybody off if they have anything else to say. I will call the roll. Jeff,
Yes.
Todd,
yes,
Faith,
Yes.
Shauna,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mike,
yes.
and the chair votes yes. All right, so that passes. Okay. And then,
Rich, can I ask a question?
yeah,
I was just wondering if this happens again, where we're going to put broadband anywhere in the county, should we consider maybe making it a policy of our IDA that we'll put this on every project? Like if Cornell wants to put in high-speed broadband, should we put that kind of restriction on that as well? But I'll let everybody go. Just, we can mull on that later on.
yeah, I think, I think we may have assumed a responsibility here that we didn't necessarily want to take on, but I guess we'll find out. I'd like to move on the agenda. I think the next item of business is directors and officers insurance budget adjustment. Heather, do you want to speak to that? John, did you have more?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say that I would absolutely support us having a policy that we won't support projects that involve proof of work cryptocurrency. And I think that that's something that we should put on a future agenda to discuss.
We certainly can. Okay, Heather?
So it was brought to our attention by a former IDA board member that there's no directors and officers coverage for the IDA and the Development Corporation. So we've worked with our insurance broker and received a quote for a premium that would be $2,149 a year to cover directors and officers for the IDA and the Development Corporation. So I would request that you amend the IDA's budget to pay the premium.
Given the discussion we just had, I want to do that.
Don't move.
I'm sorry, who moved?
I did.
John, who seconds? Todd?
Todd.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this issue? Are we ready to vote? I'll call the roll. John?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And I think we might have lost Mike again. Chair votes yes. So 6-0 with one abstention. And then I see on the agenda, I know we're out of time, but I'd like to go through and at least cover the minutes approval from our March 9th, 2022 board meeting. Could I get a motion on those minutes? John moves.
I'll move them, but I also have my hand up for a comment.
Okay, Jeff seconds. John, you have a comment?
Yeah, I know there was a critical exchange between myself and Russ regarding the Blue Ventures project, specifically around whether or not there was a provision in our documents that requires them to essentially work with us if there was an error made on our part, in which he commented that they certainly agreed to follow our policies. And that didn't appear anywhere in the minutes. If we could make sure that that does appear in the minutes when they're adopted, that feels pretty critical to me.
Yeah, John, that's correct. That should be reflected in the minutes.
Okay. Ina, did you get that?
Video again and rework the minutes.
Okay. Did you understand what he was requesting? Ina?
Yeah, and Ina, if you have questions, I understand it. Obviously, feel free to give me a bell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's your exchange with the BVSHF.
And just give me a buzz. I can give you the link.
Yeah, that's fine. If you could just send it in the email, that'd be fine.
Second, John. I was second John's motion.
Okay. Why don't we just consider that a friendly amendment to the minutes? And we can consider approval as amended. Is that everybody okay with that? I'll call the roll. John?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Shauna?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay. Is there any other business that needs to come before the board today? Heather, anything?
No, just to mention that we did provide a separate link to all the Paris reports. Those are essentially the audit plus all the project reports. They are on our website as well under reports and documents. So if anyone was interested in those, we just wanted to make sure that you had them.
Okay. Anything else from the IDA? Well, thank you everybody for the meeting, and we will reconvene in 1 month.